Welcome to the Thursday, January 23rd, 2020 Helm Developer Call. So we'll kick this off. We go through our announcements, stand-up, and discussion. Announcements, we don't have any listed. Did anybody have any announcements that they needed to make? All right, fantastic. And so with that, we will move into stand-ups. And so the first one on my screen here is Josh. Josh, I'll hand it off to you.
I do not have much to add. I've been really shifting a lot of focus to make mature the distribution, OCI distribution stuff. Once that's in place, we can try to get Helm OCI stuff out of experimental and make real changes there. So yeah, I've been a little bit absent. So if anyone ever needs anything from me, just ping me directly because my GitHub queue is out of control. I will pass to Mark.
On my side, I want to thank Farina and Fisher, who's not here, but for merging my big patch for completion in Go. So I managed to get rid of 90% of the bash scripting from within the Helm code. So that's kind of cool. I'm now working on two things: porting it to Cobra, so that the support can be available to others, and we don't have to have it in Helm itself. And I'm also working on adapting the patch or the PR for completion of plugins, Helm plugins, with the new Go completion. So that's progressing, and I should be posting something within a week, I hope. It won't be as big, and I hope somebody will have time to review it if you feel it's worth it. On to Bridget.
Okay. Last week was actually all SMI stuff, which is not super Helm related. So I don't have anything to report other than, as usual, I look at the issues and PRs and think, oh, we should probably do more about that. So this coming week, I'm hoping to do more about that. Let's see who hasn't gone. Scott, do you want to go?
Sure. And thanks again for taking notes last week. I totally skipped that one. This past week, mainly I've just been heads down, but I have done continue to do a little bit of work in some of the project issue queues related to the hub and charts related tooling stuff. I did got to at least briefly connect with Farina about the question about the Ingress Nginx project and how charts/chart repos should be handled there. And I have not been able to make one of the the SIG PM meetings yet, Matt, but I'll do that, when I get the next meeting that I can get free for. And I'll just update people here. I'm sure it won't really cause any big waves, but at least we safely won't have, a Kubernetes/Helm, a Kubernetes/charts GitHub repo. I'm sure that won't be the answer. One quick note, Jaeger tracing, and there are some other, I think Kong is now also using the new Helm actions. So people seem to be picking it up. We don't have any real good way of knowing all of who's using it because we don't get stats, at least not as far as I know. But at least we know some major orgs are using it now, and it's good.
Hey, quick question, Scott. Did anybody ever write a blog post for the Helm blog about this, the actions?
No. I think we said we wanted to. We should. I think we said we wanted to get some user feedback and, make a stable release and then tell everybody, hey, come one, come all. We haven't done that yet, but I think we probably can go at least to beta, if not stable, by now because people are using it.
Yeah, and I mean, if people are already using it, it's probably a good idea then to start versioning the API and doing all those nice things to it for them.
Yeah.
So
we are versioning. We are versioning, by the way. We're just still in like an alpha 3. but
Okay.
I'd bump that. Oh, oh gosh. I guess you, Matt, right? Did you actually go, or did you just
Well, I
say-
haven't gone yet, but there's others. How about we go to Jacob?
Okay.
Hey, I don't really have anything today, but I am writing up another proposal for Helm test to further support upgrade and downgrade testing. So right now, chart testing does upgrade tests, but if you want to do, say, like a matrix of API contract tests between old and new versions and old and new clients, that's not actually possible right now the way test hooks work. So look out for an issue on that soon. I guess Farina?
How about Martin first?
Yeah, Martin.
Hey, folks. So this week, mostly concentrating on, because there's been too many around, on bug triaging. So getting through them, some of them. Also, some PR reviews, so I've closed some of them. And also, there's been quite a lot of bits of talk out on the Slack channel, so I've been responding to any issues with that. In relation to PRs, I've pushed some PRs this week. I pulled back in stuff we learned or fixes we did for the release checklist in V2. I pulled them into V3 over into the HWWW project. And I've also been looking at, I had an issue in the migration where you could only have a single file on the kube config list. So when I dug down into that, it was a bug that was in the Helm plugin utils project. So I pushed a fix in there. So thanks to Mayor for reviewing and merging. And I pulled in then the new version of the project into the migration. That works now. So it's good to get that done. So probably over the coming week, I'm going to look at adding support around as well for passing the kube config as a flag, file as a flag, and also the context, because I think that's going to be quite handy. And also someone was looking for that as well out of the migration tool. So probably look at that. It'll be something, there'll be changes inside the migration and down into the parts of the Helm plugin utils as well, because I use that for some of the V2 work, for wrapping the V2. And I will also, the coming week, be preparing for a talk I'm doing with Taylor at the config management conference in Ghent the week after. So yeah, that's all from me. So I will hand over to, I think, Matt, you might be the last person, are you? Yeah.
Yep. So I have been reviewing the things and triaging the things primarily in the Helm Hub, Helm www, and Helm itself. And that's been my focus, is just trying to stay on top of those things a little bit every day, because there is a lot there on all of them. And so with that, we can go into discussions. And the very first discussion we have is Scott. You had a question about SA by default in Helm Create?
Oh, yeah. That's right. I guess that was from, it was added a while ago. It was added last year, and I just never noticed that. And I think when I asked the PR author, Nassim, if what the rationale was, and I'm asking because most of the community charts don't go ahead and create a service account unless you RBAC equals true or something, some logic similar to that. What he had said was there was some talks he'd gone to where it was recommended that it's just best practice, and I was curious as to why, unless the goal was to try to set users up for the future for when they do need RBAC you know, and in that case, why not create it then? So that was my main question, just because people were asking. So yeah, I don't know if anybody has any other ideas about why that would be a good default true to create a service account every time you create a chart.
So I'm the one who reviewed that. I'm looking at the pull request now. And what I remember from this was I went through and scoured through the stable charts repository to look at what pattern was used there at the time that this went in. And the pattern he did is the pattern that was used widely across the charts repository at the time.
Right, but isn't the default mostly default to false, or for the RBAC creation of those?
I don't remember. My comment it said the pattern is common in the charts repository. I may have missed a true false, but I was going for the same pattern that was used over there at the time. And
Well, that was
so
my only question. But honestly, it shouldn't take up a big percentage of our conversation pie, but that was it.
yeah, but at the time I remember I didn't know. And so I went digging to see what's the common pattern we had going over there. And that was the idea, was to say, well, if this is what we're doing over there all of the time, and that's become the common pattern, we can put it into here. But
Gotcha.
So that's how this occurred. Now, as far as a deeper rationale, I pinged all the charts maintainers and nobody chimed in. And so yeah, that's the history.
Makes sense. I'll give it a second look, and if it seems weird and useful to change it, I'll open a PR for just changing.
That would be great. That would be great. And if you got any details around it, I'd love to know those too. All right, so we can go on to the next one, which is from Martin. Upgrade from failed releases.
Yeah, sorry, on mute. So I think we discussed this last week. So it's something that we're going to keep open and have a discussion with, I think, a lot of core maintainers, because there's a couple of issues here. And the chief issues being that we can get some of the releases can go into a state that can't move on. So what we were talking about, the upgrades, for example, if somebody was using deprecated APIs and they had those charts deployed with those deprecated APIs, and then they move to 16, then they're locked down. So it's all kind of tied in together. It's showing different symptoms and different ways of getting to this, but we're kind of around the same thing. So it'll be something I think we'll have open for a while and trying to get our head around it and how we can do this best in Helm. So yeah, I'm not sure how we got into today, but yeah, okay. So that's it.
One of the cases where you can run into that is if your very first install fails for any reason, and then it can never be upgraded again without deleting the tracking secret if you're using the secrets driver, which is a really bad experience for end users.
That's a great point. Can you put a comment about that on the issue that's linked in the meeting notes today?
Yep, I'll go find it.
Thanks, Jake.
Thank you. No, that's great. As soon as you said it, it struck with me. So, all right, no good. The next one is the reintroducing the -- name flag, and this was me on here. And so there is an open issue to reintroduce the name flag from Helm v2 to Helm v3, because people who were just using it and switching it, it's now a required argument. And before it was a flag. And the idea here was to make it an optional argument if the flag is set. So it can be either or. But this also, starts to bring in ambiguity. What should you use? Why should you use it? What should the documentation say? Helm 3 was a breaking change. How should we go about approaching flags from Helm version 2 that have a different way of doing things in v3? And we did this on the version flag with the -C to try to aid in detection between Helm 2 and Helm 3. That's the one other time we did it, and we had a major case for it. But what do we do? What should we do here, and why? Do we want to deprecate it, right? If people do use the name flag instead of the argument, should they get a deprecation warning? What do folks think?
Honestly, the first thing that comes to mind is, didn't we change a lot of flags to try to make them more Kubernetes native, or like make them match Kubernetes better? So is that going to be a factor in anything that's decided here?
Yeah, we we have we have a few things going on. So we we drop things like Helm in it, and that causes pandemonium from time to time out in the community. And people go, "What the hell happened?" And yeah, it's not documented and so forth. And then we have ones where we change like fetch and pull, but you can still use, it's got aliases and stuff like that. In other situations, there are no aliases. So we don't. Oh yeah, lovely cat. So we don't actually have an actual pattern, and as we didn't do deprecation as such. Now, I don't like what I think is lovely is we don't break anything from one major release to another, and I think that's very commendable, and it seems to have been respected. What I can see historically, 1, 2, 3. Whereas with relation to stuff we changed, can we go around saying putting deprecation into it now when the horse has bolted? The release is gone, it's out, and are we just going to convolute things by putting -- name back in? So that's my big worry. That's why I held back on the -C as well. I was a bit against it. I don't really mind. I'd agree with Matt and other people, and I think people always need to be able to use their stuff. But I suppose there has to be a point to say that we have changed. It has changed, So that's just my 2 cents on it.
Personally, I'm with Martin on this one.
Does anybody else have any opinions from the product? Just thinking about it from that way or from some other perspective. I know we've got a number of maintainers on. Is everybody the other maintainers not care, not have a preference, like it, have some insight? It's totally okay to abstain, but I just want to make sure everybody gets a chance who has some view on this.
My honest opinion about the detail of the deprecated warning is that in that I agree with what I got from what you said, Martin, in that it doesn't really make sense given that we've already fully deprecated it by just removing it. Adding it back and then saying it's going to be deprecated again seems kind of like a half stance. I don't know. But apart from that, I wouldn't be opposed to, personally, just thinking about users adding in backwards compatibility as long as it's not sufficiently complicated to maintain. The thing about the client-only flag is it was a fairly easy fix. I remember that was part of the discussion from before. If it would be super difficult, I haven't looked into what it would take, to make the second argument optional if you pass the other flag for backwards compatibility. If it's very easy, cool. But I would, and I was a fan of giving a note of this in the documentation is if we're going to add these in the docs, I would flat out say we've left this in for backwards compatibility.
So if we are open to making backwards compatibility related changes, I have heard complaints from the community about suddenly having to have -- generate name has changed their workflow and things like that. So let's consider this in the context of if we're going to do this sort of thing, it's going to set a precedent and then people are going to ask. So basically I would like us to be as compatible as possible with the past and with people's finger macros. And at the same time, I'm worried about if we appear like we're going to change course constantly. Then people will be like, if I lobby enough, I can get my thing changed.
I agree with Bridget on that. It's kind of like, your 2 children and one of them says, I want sweets, and you give one sweets one and you don't give it to the other. Who do you love more? On the serious side, I mean, where are you going to draw a line on it? And if the policy, and probably Matt, you might be best to say that, if the policy has always been with Helm that, look, we don't break backwards compatibility in minor releases, but on major releases we can, and we move on, then maybe that's good enough. But I suppose, you're trying to say you don't want to break people's setups and stuff like that, but still.
Oh, I'm not saying there's actually a pull request that's gotten its one approval required on it to add this back in. There's an open pull request with its
Oh, yeah.
approval. It just has not been merged.
No. But no. I know the specific case, but I'm talking in the general case of like if we're allowed, if we're allowed change things from a project point of view for major releases, and we can break back for compatibility, then I suppose we have put our stance out there. Yeah. I find it, without going into it any longer. Yeah, I think the precedence here could be difficult, as Bridget said.
Okay, I will make a comment on the pull request based on our discussion here. So, what? Well, the discussion seemed to be overwhelmingly, let's not merge it because of the unshakiness of the precedent. We've broken backwards compatibility and it's usable, but this opens a precedent for other things. And what is that bar? And we don't have anything established on it. And the dash generate has totally thrown off my workflow, quite frankly. It's new finger learning. So we all got a little bit of that with Helm v3. So at what point do we draw the line? And if we're kind of waffling, then there's a lot of roads we can go down. Bridget.
I feel like this screams for a configuration option. You pick, do you want this to work or do you want this to not work? I mean, if we wanted to go the route of, okay, you don't have to have this breaking change, set this flag, and then you can have things the way you want, your mileage may vary. I mean, that's, if we wanted to take this PR, it's like put it behind a flag that people can set if they want it. And that way, at least it's, people are happy by obscurity. They're going to have the happy path unless they choose to go do something that, and you could do the same thing with generate name, I guess.
This sounds like just a lot of added complexity to Helm to support users, and people have different preferences. Quite frankly, there's lots of different styles, and so that's hard. I'm going to make a nice long-winded comment on the issue if somebody else has, or on the actual pull request, because I don't want the issue and pull request to be kind of conflated here. If I'd like it right where the code is, so somebody just doesn't hit merge because they didn't see the issue. So I'm going to make the comments over there based on what I think the discussion was here. So if anybody else wants to chime in, go ahead. But I'm personally, I'm kind of against it. It's a major version release. Things change. This happens in every tool that has a major version release. I just get used to it. So that's kind of my view on it. If it were, and I'm wary about the precedent it sets of adding lots of things in. I'm very slow. I set a high bar for backwards compatibility for little things like this. That's just you're remembering things and what you're used to. And maybe that's just me. So
just to clarify one thing, if I may, the parallel between version -C is different, because there was a justification for that where you could not figure out which Helm you had without it. There is no case in my mind to add the minus name. There's no real value added.
It sounds okay. That makes perfect sense. All right, we have a few minutes left. Before we jump into the last few things, I did want to see if anybody was up for being moderator in notes next week, so we can fill that out before anybody may have to jump off.
I could moderate.
Okay. Anybody up for notes? All right, I'll do it. All right, on to the next thing. Martin, you have a community member would like to add packages, Debian and RPM packages for Helm.
Yeah, so PR is there, I suppose, and that person added a comment in, so the link is straight to that person's comment. So they're all up for this. Is this something we want in the community? We put our support behind this person and give them help with it. They're talking about hosting stuff, a repo somewhere. Are we in kind of a gray area like we talked about last week in relation to being the S390X? That kind of direction where we're saying, do we support in the build system linking in then for the CI? Is this kind of a thing where we put something into our docs and it's up to this person or whoever in their community to keep that supported, and we provide a link to it or whatever? What is our thoughts?
So I haven't read this issue. Are they actually offering to host it themselves rather than the Helm project host it?
Yes. If I bring it back up, just 1 second.
Because a lot of this has to do with who's doing it and the trust of origin, right? If somebody who's doing it, who's not part of the Helm project, is doing it and it's hosted elsewhere, but we broadcast it as ours, then that's going to cause a trust issue, where by them trusting the CNCF and the Helm project, but yet it's somebody totally different. And if something happens over there, we've got no control over it. If they want to self-host this, I'm totally fine with it as long as we point out that this is a third party, go over here and learn about them, that's hosting this, right? It's a trust thing.
Yeah, so he said there's a couple of things. First of all, he said he's willing to write the scripts to generate the Debian and RPM packages. That's the first thing. And yeah, they'll be generated onto releases. So part one there, do we trust that? And then he's talking about constructing a trusted repo. As you say, how do we trust that? And which do we want to maybe take control of it ourselves? Or do we say the final option is, do we just want to say, look, there's a third party out here. It's up to you to decide if you want to trust or not. So I suppose there are three options.
So, go ahead. Okay, so my comment is with Glide, the package manager, we did this. We had somebody who did the trusted repository, but quite frankly, I was never going to keep up on my Debian scripting, and when he wasn't around, it just was off my mind and it fell behind, and it was being part of the project. It was hard to keep it up and to deal with issues and bugs in it when he became unresponsive. And I couldn't, and nobody else who really worked on Glide ever wanted to touch that. And so it became hard to say, well, it's part of the project because we're distributing it this way when we really didn't touch it or have control over it. And so unless we have maintainers who want to step up and really manage this, what I would suggest is we in our documentation point to this as a third party and let him go to town on it. But people know it's a third party, it's his responsibility, it's his fame if it becomes huge. But that's the way I would handle it. So that way a burden doesn't fall on us that we're not ready to handle. Because undoubtedly I expect that to happen.
Okay, so in other words, the build and everything is totally his or hers baby, basically. And they look after every part. And all we do is provide a link inside in the documentation to say there's a third party builds of the packages here.
That's what I would do, just from my experience, unless we have maintainers who want to take it on with him.
Okay.
My network is flaky, so I might have missed if you mentioned it. There's a precedence with Brew, no? Brew has a package.
Yeah, and that's handled entirely outside of Helm, not by Helm.
Yeah, and what we've noticed in the last couple of months is the same thing happening. What Matt said, it hasn't kept up with the movement of Helm, moving towards Helm 3, and people are going, you've no installation for Helm 3, etc., or for this version. So
I thought that was all fixed now.
It is finally.
Yeah,
fixed.
but that's when the person came back up to scratch with it. But the issues came into us, but we were able to say then, sorry, this is out here. So that person was good and responsive, as Matt said. But you know, if it doesn't go that way, then yeah. But at least people know it's third party and so forth. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then the last thing that I just wanted to touch on, we've got slated a 3.0.3 release and a 3.1.0 release. We'd actually hoped to get 3.1.0 out in January, but we're quickly coming to the end of that. It's been a while since we've had a minor release. I don't know if anybody's up for jumping on board, but it would be really nice to round out the 3.0.3 release, get that out, and then round out the 3.1.0 release maybe a week later and get that out. I'd love it if we could get the 3.0.3 release out next week. We're coming to the end of the week, so I wouldn't suggest a release. But if anybody's got time to help me get some of these releases out, it would be fantastic. That's it.
I have bandwidth in the next week, and I would love to learn about it, though I don't really know what I'm doing in terms of this particular process.
Sweet. Find me next week, and I will share anything you want to know. I'm happy to. And that's it. So we are 4 minutes over. Did anybody have any last words? Have a wonderful week, y'all. We'll see you online. We'll be back next week.
Bye.
Okay. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.